Ted Bundy. Everyone knows the name and the monster behind it, yet only a few know where it all began. Long before the crimes, the headlines, and the name the world would come to fear, there were signs, quiet ones, hiding in plain sight. I didn't wake up one day a killer. What I became was shaped slowly over time. Today, I'm taking you back to my very first days, showing how that path led me to become one of the most infamous serial killers in history. Watch closely until the end, because I'll reveal details that have never been shared before. My life began in November of 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, inside a home for unwed mothers, a place meant to hide mistakes rather than celebrate new beginnings. I was born as Theodore Robert Cowell, and from the very start, my existence carried shame and secrecy. My mother was only 22, unmarried, and unwilling to speak openly about those early days, and I would later learn she tried to give me up for adoption before my grandfather stepped in, took us both, and brought us to his home in Philadelphia, where the lie that defined my childhood began. I grew up believing that my grandparents, Samuel Necht Cowell and Eleanor Miriam Longstreet Cowell, were my real parents, and that my mother was simply my older sister, a story no one ever explained, but one I accepted without question, even though something always felt wrong. The man I believed was my father, my grandfather, was the only male figure in my life, and he ruled the house with fear, a violent temper, and heavy drinking, exploding without warning and leaving everyone on edge. Yet somehow I admired him, perhaps because power and cruelty felt stronger than kindness. I watched him hurt my grandmother, and I despised what I saw as weakness in her, learning early that strength meant control. As a child, I looked normal from the outside, growing up in what seemed like a quiet, working-class home. But inside me, something was already taking shape. I was drawn to sharp objects early on, especially knives, fascinated by the way they felt in my hands and the control they seemed to give me. One night, when I was about 3 years old, I wandered through the house while everyone slept and slipped into my Aunt Julia's room, pulling back her blanket and carefully placing butcher knives underneath it, one by one, until she woke up and stared at me in shock, asking what I was doing. I didn't answer her. I just stood there, smiling, before calmly turning around and walking out of the room. Moments like that weren't accidents, and they weren't isolated. Eleanor eventually moved us to Tacoma, Washington, where she married a cook named Johnny Culpepper Bundy on May 19, 1951. He legally adopted me, giving me his last name. That was how my name changed to Ted Bundy. Johnny was my father by law, but I never truly felt connected to him. I saw him as simple, uneducated, and beneath me, and that distance never closed. Soon, my mother and Johnny started a new family, and one by one, siblings arrived. The life I once had alone with my mother disappeared, replaced by noise, competition, and shared attention. I didn't adjust well. The love that had once felt exclusive now had to be divided, and something inside me hardened as I learned what it meant to be pushed aside. So I turned outward, spending my time in the streets and the woods with the neighborhood kids, looking for something to replace what I'd lost. There, I began to develop a curiosity about death and the insides of living things. I loved hunting frogs and pretending I was some kind of king of the forest, a title I gave myself. On the surface, it seemed like ordinary childhood fun, but there was a darker side the other children would never forget. I found ways to entertain myself that scared and disturbed them, like the time I took a cat, hung it with a rope, lit a match, and watched it burn, laughing as the children came running, horrified by what they saw. I didn't see it as cruel. To me, it was amusing. I sometimes cut open animals, feeling nothing at all, no fear, no guilt, no emotion. I spent hours digging holes along forest trails, hiding spikes beneath leaves, waiting for someone to step on them. I knew exactly what would happen. One young girl in the neighborhood stepped into it, and she was severely hurt. My family never spoke of it, and I kept my secrets well, letting the world see only the harmless, normal child they wanted me to be. When it was time to go back inside, the house only deepened what I felt. I hated my home life. I was ashamed of Johnny, ashamed of the little money he made, the cheap cars he drove, the way he carried himself. When I went to Sears with my mother, I wanted better clothes, nicer things, proof that I was meant for more than this small, ordinary life. At night, while everyone slept, I lay awake listening to talk radio, imagining myself as a rich, powerful man being interviewed and admired by everyone. I let those fantasies carry me away, even though deep down, I knew that life would never truly be mine. Over time, those dreams began to twist into something darker. My thoughts turned to control, to hurting people, hurting women, and crossing lines I knew I shouldn't. I remember one incident from a very young age involving my sister, driven by that same need for power. In that moment, I imagined myself as my grandfather, seeing in my sister the same weakness I had observed in my grandmother. At school, I struggled to belong. I didn't fit in with the other boys, and I was often mocked or pushed aside, made to feel different and inferior. My speech impediment set me apart even more, and it frustrated me deeply that I couldn't keep up with the boys around me, especially in Boy Scouts. I hated feeling weak or left behind. There was one boy in the Scouts I couldn't stand. I remember that time I let him walk in front of me, came up behind him, and struck him over the head with a stick. It was my way of trying to overcome the sense of inadequacy I felt. At this stage of my life, basketball and baseball never really captured me. I never found myself in team sports. I had other interests beyond cutting up animals and hurting people. One of these interests was shoplifting ski equipment and forging lift tickets. Just because I couldn't afford these things didn't mean I didn't deserve them. I also began engaging in voyeurism, secretly observing people without their consent. On the surface, my life still looked normal. I had a few friends, delivered newspapers, cut lawns, went to church with my parents, and even became vice president of the Methodist Youth Fellowship. I once helped save a friend's young niece from drowning, a moment that made people see me as dependable and responsible. But beneath that image, I was drawn to dark detective stories that explored violence and the worst sides of human behavior, and I engaged in secret behaviors at school that reflected impulses I didn't yet understand. But my teenage years were very different. Before I tell you how my teenage years unfolded, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. When I hit my teens, my interests began to shift in unsettling ways. I spent a lot of time collecting and reading crime and mystery magazines, along with other material that influenced my thinking in unhealthy directions. My exposure to this kind of content started very early, around the age of 3 or 4, when a cousin and I came across magazines that belonged to my grandfather. I didn't understand what it was at the time, but now, as a teenager, those early experiences fueled my thoughts about power and control, urges I kept carefully hidden and already understood all too well. In high school, I had more acquaintances, but very few real connections. Something about me was distant, insincere. I struggled to form close friendships, especially with girls. I watched them from a distance, unsure how to approach them, unsure of what I was supposed to do. I went on only one date, and it wasn't fear or dislike that held me back. It was the simple fact that I had no idea how to be with them. I was small-framed, awkward, uncomfortable in group settings, avoiding communal showers where I felt exposed and humiliated. Older boys bullied me, and I carried that resentment with me, passing it downward onto those younger and weaker. I sometimes sought situations where I could feel a sense of control over others. I also spent long stretches alone, wandering, peering into windows, stealing things that caught my interests. What I didn't expect was that one of the things that would soon catch my interest would change everything that came after. On August 31st, 1961, I was visiting my uncle in my Tacoma neighborhood, my mind crowded with images and ideas I had been feeding for months. That night, my attention settled on 8-year-old Anne-Marie Burr. I had seen her before. She was a small, beautiful blonde girl. She lived only a few blocks away in a house I already knew well from my paper route. I knew the routines of the street, the stillness of late hours, the moment when houses fell silent. I waited for the right opportunity. When I saw that a window was already unlocked, I placed a stool beneath it and climbed inside while the house slept. Her parents and sister were only rooms away, unaware of what was happening until it was over. I took her and exited through the front door. There were no screams, no struggle, just silence and then absence. When they realized she was gone, panic spread quickly. They searched the house, discovered the open window and the unlocked door. Neighbors were alerted, police arrived, the entire neighborhood poured into the streets, but no one looked at me. Anne-Marie Burr's case remains unsolved. Her secret stayed with me forever. It was a turning point in my life, the moment when ideas I had studied and fixated on moved from my mind into the real world. And when they never caught me, I realized I was different, capable of doing what others couldn't, and walking away unseen. In 1965, I graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in Tacoma, Washington, and immediately enrolled at the University of Puget Sound, a private liberal arts college in my hometown. During that time, I began stealing regularly and was arrested more than once for burglary and vehicle theft, though the charges were later dropped under juvenile rules. In 1966, I transferred to the University of Washington, where I enrolled in Asian Studies and intensive Chinese language courses. I felt that China was a country the world would one day have to reckon with, and that fluency in the language would be imperative. In 1967, while studying at the University of Washington, I met a beautiful girl named Diane Marjorie Jean Edwards. She was sophisticated, confident, and came from a wealthy family, everything I felt I was not and everything I wanted to become. We talked, spent time together, and slowly fell in love. It was the first time I had a real girlfriend, and it became a deeply impactful moment for me. We made beautiful memories together, driving around, holding hands, kissing, whispering to each other. I was genuinely in love with Diane. During this period, my academic focus began to drift. I lost interest in Chinese and shifted toward classes in urban planning and sociology. Still, my insecurities surfaced. Diane noticed how emotional I was, how I used people to get what I wanted. She sensed that I admired her lifestyle, her clothes, her car, her future, perhaps more than I admired her. By 1968, Diane graduated and moved to San Francisco for work. The relationship became long distance and quickly unraveled. After the breakup in 1969, I left the University of Washington altogether. With no degree and no clear direction, I began working multiple minimum wage jobs. From the outside, people saw me as normal, just a young man trying to get through and find a better life for himself. But inside, I felt an overwhelming sense of rejection. The breakup with Diane hurt me deeply, and I began to want revenge, not just on her, but on any girl who looked like her. These were my early years, long before the world would come to know my name. The story continues in the playlist linked here, where more chapters will be uncovered over time. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any part of what comes next.